RealTalk USA.
Hello everyone, this is our weekly show RealTalk USA on 15.3 FM, and it's me, Yuel Solomon, with
Mazgabat Adesa. Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have a guest, and we're going to introduce him. His name is Mr. C.D. Glin. He is the president and CEO of the U.S. African Development Foundation. He's been in that position since September 2016. Welcome to the show, Mr. Glin, and thank you for being on Real Talk USA.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'd like to begin with introduction. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? You know, where you're from, what you did before you became the CEO of
Life before the CEO. Okay, so I'm C.D. Glin. I claim Washington, D.C. as my home in the U.S. I can say for the past 20 years, I can say my whole life has been dedicated to Africa and African development one way or another. As an African American, I always found a strong sense of connection to the continent, and so even in undergrad at Howard University, I studied U.S. foreign policy towards Africa and African studies. And then just fast forward over the past 20 years, I've spent time about 10 of those years on the continent. So I was a Peace Corps volunteer in the first group in South Africa when Mandela was president. I went on to live in Ghana as a Foreign Service intern. I worked in Nigeria as an independent consultant, but also working with the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation. And then most recently, I spent 5.5 years in Nairobi, Kenya, as the associate director for the Africa region for the Rockefeller Foundation. And it was from that point at the Rockefeller Foundation that I ended up getting nominated and selected to lead the U.S. African Development Foundation in late 2016.
Okay. Before we go to the U.S. Africa Development Foundation, when you mean the first Peace Corps group, you mean there was no Peace Corps program in South Africa?
Exactly.
Before Mandela actually became here?
No, that's a great point. Peace Corps has been around since 1961
Absolutely.
in hundreds of countries in the totality, and it was in the mid 90s when President Clinton was president and Mandela came to power. One of the early meetings that President Clinton and Mandela had was about development in the country, social impact in the country, and the Peace Corps as a tool of grassroots engagement, as citizen ambassadors of sending Americans, the best and brightest of America, to live and work and be with and become part of the fabric of different societies from a cross-cultural standpoint. Peace Corps became a real important point with President Mandela and President Clinton, and the agency put together a group of diverse individuals to be the first Peace Corps cohort, the first Peace Corps group in South Africa, to really showcase diversity as a strength to a new South Africa. The diversity of America, African Americans, Asian Americans, people over 50 years of age, married couples, just the diversity of the country, the United States, showcasing in visual, physical form to a new South Africa what integration and diversity can do and does do for an emerging democracy.
Which is kind of special because Peace Corps usually involves a very young group of people. And so it must have been very interesting to be part of that group. Do you know the reason why there had not been a Peace Corps group until that time?
I mean, Peace Corps had been in Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland all around, but really it had a lot to do with apartheid. That was sort of foremost the rationale and the reason because of the apartheid regime, and when Mandela came to power, opening up the country, looking at global engagement, diversity as a strength, Peace Corps became an important tool to put Americans on the ground in Black South African communities to work with South Africans and to be a part of America's engagement with South Africa, the new South Africa under Mandela.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Now, coming back to the U.S. Africa Development Foundation, what is it? Can you tell us a little bit about it and what it stands for, its mission?
Great, thank you. So the U.S. African Development Foundation is an independent federal agency of the U.S. government. What does that mean? That means we were established by an act of Congress, and we don't, as an agency, report to a cabinet. We are managed and governed by a board of directors as what's called a public corporation. So I, as the CEO, as the president and CEO, report to a board of directors of individuals that are that are nominated by the president of the United States and confirmed by the Senate. And so we are an agency that reports, directly to Congress and to the executive branch and to the president. So that independence is really, really important because the foundation was established to almost disrupt development. So it was the global agency for international development within the U.S. government is USAID.
Yes.
There's not a listener to this program that won't know USAID.
True.
But there are very few listeners that will know USADF, the United States African Development Foundation. That's because we were established 20 years after USAID to be very, very specific and targeted in what we do, how we do it, and where we do it. So let me go through that. So in the 80s, there was a reckoning and a recognition that development sort of needed to change, that we needed new tools in our foreign assistance toolkit, if you will, the way that we engage nations. And Africa was foremost in that change of engagement. And so the question was, can we work directly with African communities to invest directly into African communities? But more than that, can we not in Washington, D.C., come up with strategies for helping poor and vulnerable and underserved communities? Can we go to those communities and ask them what they need? Can we, quote unquote, be demand responsive? So giving Africans themselves a voice and a choice in their own development, not what we in Washington are thinking that they need. Can we start with where they are and ask them what they need in terms of assistance, provide direct funding, grant capital, seed capital directly to African organizations, but also more importantly, link them with project management support, with business development support, with mentorship, advisory services, also by Africans. So our funding only goes to 100% African-owned and operated community or social enterprises. The support that we give that's non-financial, so we give grants up to $250,000 directly to community groups, cooperatives, smallholder farmers, young people, women's organizations, financing directly up to $100,000. But we also link those organizations to technical support because it's always about more than money. Every development project or program would say we need financing, we need money. So we have seed capital, grant capital, but we also know that those groups need, beyond money, they need management support, they need mentorship. And usually that comes from a US or a UK NGO that comes to the ground. But even in the 80s, the thought was there are African organizations that can provide that project management support. There are African organizations that can provide that management and mentorship. And we, as the U.S. African Development Foundation, provide direct funding to community groups, but we also provide funding and support to African capacity building organizations that we link to our grant investments. So 100% of our funding goes to African organizations that we fund from a project management standpoint, but also to cooperatives and community groups that we also provide grant financing to.
How many countries do you operate in Africa?
So currently we have full operations in 20 African countries. And that is geographically spread from West Africa and the Sahel to East Africa and the Horn of Africa to Central Africa and the Great Lakes region, and even in Southern Africa as well. So we have a broad variety of countries that we operate in, and that geographical scope is really important because the needs, the challenges, the opportunities to invest in Africans and their ideas is spread around the continent. And so we do take a broad approach to trying to stimulate local economic development, but also trade and investment. And so that's really important for us to provide this funding at the community level to stimulate economic growth, because as Africa is growing economically, there are still groups and communities that, quote unquote, get left behind in that growth story. So we see our capital, our catalytic capital, our grant financing to community and social enterprises and African entrepreneurs, we see that as a way to stimulate economic development in these hard-to-reach places, in places as far reaching as Mauritania, or in a country like Kenya, in areas like Turkana and Garissa in the northern part of the countries. Here and in Ethiopia, we operate in the southern region in Oromo, Amhara region, and Tigray, and so we're in places that are not the capital cities, and we're operating with people that sometimes are left behind in Africa's growth story.
And what is the reaction of governments, local governments, to these kinds of operations that you're talking about?
It's tremendously positive because of our operating model. So when we talk about our assistance, yes, it is funding from U.S. taxpayers. We are a government-funded institution, but increasingly we're also able to leverage funding from local governments, meaning state or county governments, and also national governments. Why is that? Why is an American development institution able to get co-funding from an African nation? Because of the way we operate, because 100% of our funding is going to local organizations, and because the technical assistance and capacity building that we're giving, the project management support, is also going to African institutions. So governments, national governments such as Uganda, Malawi, Benin, Nigeria, many African nations actually co-invest in ADF programs. Why? Because we're investing directly into their people, and we're helping their people become part of this growth story of their countries, but also we're reaching those groups that are sometimes left behind, that are underserved, that are in need, difficult to get to, hard to reach, hard to program in. And so we become an important tool, not only of the U.S. government's ability to reach and do more in places of need, but those national governments also find it hard to program in those areas. And so we have really strong partnerships. We talk about our model being, and the ADF, the African Development Foundation, being a partner of choice for communities. The communities in which we operate, we partner with them. We ask them what they need. We help them find out things that they didn't know they needed, and we work together to co-create solutions. So communities partner with us. We talk about countries partnering with us because we build our country strategies upon the country's national development plans and needs. So we're not coming in with our own priorities. We're building our priorities on the national government's priorities, and so they co-invest with us, and they also partner with us. And then increasingly, we find U.S. and international corporations who also want to invest in Africa partnering with us because, again, we can help create corporate social responsibility, the social license to operate in these communities, in these countries, but we also have mechanisms because of our local presence in 20 countries, hundreds of African staff who have the local knowledge and understanding of how to program in those areas. So companies such as GE, American companies, GE, Citi, many American companies that are trying to link and do more in Africa partner with the U.S. African Development Foundation because of our relationships with Africans and our fiber being 100% what we call African-led development. Africans are leading our development initiatives.
So you've told us that the USADF is involved in 20 countries. Are there any selecting criteria for these 20 countries to to benefit from your foundation, or is just
more and more we look at there's the broad-based criteria of how we would establish or operate in a country, and it's very, very robust, and a lot has to do with the economic development needs of those countries, the country's willingness to partner and to partner with a U.S. government agency, the country's ability to really try to advance our efforts. We look at, we have a model of development that we think governments can adopt by investing directly into their local communities by trying to reach underserved populations. And so the criteria for country selection is very, very robust. Another criteria that's equally as important is how we make grants. So we can decide on countries in different ways that have to do with our country protocol agreements and what would enable us to work in Ethiopia or any other country on the continent. But how do we choose the groups that we're funding? Right now, across those 20 countries, we have about 500 different, right now, and it changes about every year, a new 500, a new 300 grantees and groups that we're funding. And we say we can find groups, we can fund groups, we can support groups, and we can grow them. So we really are looking at economic development in those communities, and we have a solicitation process. We have a selection process, we have a scoring, a screening process that really helps us determine, are these grant investments in local community-based organizations, local community-based or social enterprises, are these investments? It's grant financing, but we do want a return. We want a social and an economic and sometimes an environmental return. So let me just break down Ethiopia. What are we doing in Ethiopia? Most of our funding in Ethiopia is around off-grid energy, renewable energy, because energy access is an important need in this country. And so last year in 2017, we invested approximately $1 million in 10 different Ethiopian off-grid energy entrepreneurs. These are Ethiopian renewable energy businesses in solar, in wind, in hydro, and they are coming up with solutions to meet the challenges of energy access in Ethiopians' communities. And those businesses, we want to make sure those businesses have a social impact, so they're providing energy access to hopefully thousands of people, that they are profitable, so they're generating revenues and they're increasing incomes, but also because they're solar, wind, or hydro, they're renewable. So they have an environmental impact. And so we look at a real return on our investment with a framing around social impact, economic impact, and environmental impact when and where the opportunity presents itself.
Thank you. You actually got ahead of me and answered some of my questions that were to come. You said USADF's investment in Africa was about 100,000.
So our investment in Africa annually, every year, we invest about $30 million.
$30 million.
Every year, a new $30 million into 100% African-owned and operated projects.
Now, you mentioned, for example, renewable and off-grid energy, but what are other areas in which these investments focus on?
No, great question. So in some instances, because we don't want to sit in Washington, D.C. and decide the challenges facing the continent. We want to be on the ground and really be responsive to the needs that communities are facing and that they address. But more and more, we see the opportunities that are coming up and the challenges that communities are asking us to address in probably 3 areas. And the first one is around agriculture, food security, and sort of climate resilience. And that is directly because out of a continent of 1.2 billion people, you have more than 70% of those people who earn their livelihoods in the agricultural value chain. So food insecurity and agricultural development and agro-industrialization is really, really important. And so we focus a lot of our investments in small-scale producers, in terms of small-scale farmers. We also small-scale processors. So a lot of our focus is on food security and agricultural business development. The next sort of area that we find more and more opportunities coming is in energy access. Again, a continent, 1.2 billion people. About 600 million people throughout the continent don't have access to power, to energy. But guess what? Those people, sometimes poor and vulnerable, are paying more for power. They're buying batteries every day. They're buying kerosene. They're buying diesel. They're buying candles to light up their homes. And so our investment and the opportunities that we see more and more are coming as a result of Africa and Africans' need for energy power. So we find ourselves investing a lot in the renewable energy, off-grid energy space. And then the other area that is just really in the last couple of years has become paramount to the work that we support along with agriculture and energy is around youth employment, youth empowerment, youth entrepreneurship, youth workforce development. Because again, thinking about the continent, right now, the stats say from the African Development Bank, and their report, they talk about between the ages of 14 to 25 that Africa has about 225 million young people between the ages of 14 and 25. So 225 million young people between 14 and 25. The projection is that by 2030, there's going to be 100 million more young people in that same age group. So by 2030, you're talking about 320 million, at least. So almost 100 million more young people who are coming of age. And the stat that I hear again and again is that every year you have 12 million young people who are coming into the workforce. And where are they going to work? What force are they going to work in, if you will? And so we look at youth employment, youth entrepreneurship, youth workforce development as critical areas of opportunity for us to support and invest in. And that's where we're spending a lot of our energy and a lot of our time in funding entrepreneurial endeavors by young people all over the continent. We link those to broader initiatives. And so listeners might be aware of an initiative called YALI, Young African Leaders Initiative.
Yes.
So the Young African Leaders Initiative was a great opportunity for the U.S. African Development Foundation to invest in young people and Africans and their ideas. So through the YALI program, a number of the selected fellows ended up being selected because they were in what's called the business and entrepreneurship track.
Yes.
There's a sort of a public management, public administration track. Then there's a civil society track. But those that were in the business and entrepreneurship track, the African Development Foundation said, those are some of Africa's best and brightest throughout the continent.
Amazing. They're amazing.
Throughout the continent. And what if they're going to come to the U.S. and they're going to come to the best business schools that we have, and they're going to be exposed to a lot of business management techniques, and then they're going to come back. They're going to come back to Addis and Kinshasa and Nairobi and Lagos and Dakar and Lilongwe, and they're going to need to grow their businesses. What if we provided grant financing and funding to help them scale up, start up, expand their businesses? And so over the past 4 years, we've spent more than $5 million invested directly in providing grants directly to young African entrepreneurs, grants as little as $10,000 and as high as $100,000 to these young people who are creating solutions to Africans' challenges. And so right now we have a cohort throughout 31 countries throughout the continent. So 31 different countries. We have 200 entrepreneurs, YALI fellows, who we provided grant funding to scale up their 200 YALI fellows who we have provided funding to the tune of almost $5 million to help them scale their businesses. And we look at this now as a growing part of our portfolio, portfolio in agriculture, our portfolio in off-grid renewable energy, and now our portfolio in youth.
Yes.
You got it.
Oh my, these young people, they make you wonder what, I read the applications and what have I been doing with my life? They are so young and they have done a lot for especially their immediate communities, and they're very bright. They are solution oriented, and it's amazing that you funnel your energies into these groups.
Because you said they're solution oriented. They're solutionists. These are young people who aren't sitting back saying, give me this or give me that. They're taking, and they're sort of putting solutions, saying, look, I have an idea. Provide the funding, provide the business know-how, provide the opportunity, provide the market, and I'll take it the rest of the way. And we love that African ingenuity. We love that African entrepreneurship. And we're saying that the future of Africa is going to be on the backs and the brains and at the level of these young people. And so we need to get on board. I mean, that's how we have to really, if we're talking about really making transformational change on the continent, we do have to address issues of food security and energy poverty, but we also have to back and support young African entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much for that. I have a question. This all sounds great, but why invest in rural development in Africa? What's in it for the U.S. government? What's in it for the U.S.?
There's a number of reasons. So as someone who spent a lot of time on the continent in various countries, and who tries to have my finger on the pulse of where we're going, one would say we need to be having a large number of investments in urbanization, right? Countries and cities are rapidly urbanizing, and people are leaving rural areas and coming to the cities. And I don't disagree with that. But also still, more than 50% of Africa in various countries, it's still rural. And so how are we creating opportunities so that Africans living in rural areas and opportunities, again, aren't left behind? These are hard to reach. As everyone sort of starts funneling more money into capital cities and secondary cities, we want to make sure that other people are able to benefit, and rural transformation can occur in the areas where the majority still of people are living and operating.
I have a somewhat similar question with this. Most African countries have agricultural-led economies. And how is your investment helping these backward agricultural practices in the continent? Because most of the African farmers are practicing agrarian kind of agriculture.
So this is great because it links to the rural development, why invest in rural populations and rural areas. So some of it from a U.S. standpoint becomes the fact that we want to create more local economic development, and people are still living off of the land and in places where there is land. There's also a peace and security and economic stability element in that we want to ensure that populations that are underserved, that they have opportunities and are provided with some level of hope and a pathway to prosperity to be able to benefit. And so we want to be in those places and want to partner with governments to ensure that the people who are facing a lot of challenges, that they don't resort to other means, if you will, to because they are left behind of all the growth and investment that we hear about in Africa. When we look at agricultural transformation, we probably put it into 4 buckets, if you will. So if we know that the majority of Africans are in the agricultural value chain, and as you mentioned, are sort of using, let's just say, old methods, if you will, of agriculture, the first thing that we say is that we need to bring them together. We need to aggregate. So it's really about not being 200 million plus individual smallholder farmers, but bringing them together and aggregating them to create a larger market. So we focus a lot around aggregation and bringing them together, whether it's in co-ops and cooperatives or producer groups or any number of agricultural linkages where we're looking at a community of producers or of farmers. So aggregation is key. Then the next thing we look at is making sure that when people are farming, that they're farming with a market in mind. You're going to grow, fantastic. Who's going to buy? So literally, as you start your farming activity, do so with some off-taker or farmer in mind, that there is an off-taker, a market that you can link to. So the market is really important. Aggregating farmers, bringing from one to many to create a larger market, linking that larger market of producers to buyers, so making sure that they're growing their crops with buyers in mind, and then inserting, and this is why our grant funding and our financing to cooperatives and to agriculture groups is so important, because you need 2 other things. Yes, you need to be a large number of producers that are producing large enough. You need to have buyers who want to buy, a market that wants to buy what you have. But in order to really transform your crops to make it more marketable, if you will, you need technology and you need some level of financing. So technology can be equipment. It can be mechanization, where you're talking about tractors and things for greater production. It could be pesticides. It could be fertilizer, higher producing seeds. So really ensuring that these groups that are asking for funding are thinking about technology in different ways. It could be even we support a group in Rwanda and in Tanzania that are using drones to do
really high tech
to do crop surveillance. They have smartphones. There are drones that are telling them whether or not there are hundreds of acres that this cooperative has under cultivation, whether or not there's crop disease. It can do yield prediction. It's doing weather sensing, so whether it's going to rain. All these technological advancements need to come to the farmers, and some of them are about ensuring that they produce more. Some of them are ensuring that they actually know what's happening in their fields, and some of them are ensuring the technology to ensure that when they actually are producing, that they have post-harvest management. 30 to 50% of everything that's grown in Africa is wasted or spoiled. it's lost post-harvest. So you're talking about cereals and grains, how much rice, wheat, maize is lost because of no storage. Fruits and vegetables, dairy, cassava in terms of roots and tubers. So you need equipment, you need technology to process and preserve and store what you actually are producing. And so we make sure that the groups that we're funding, that they're asking us or that we're offering to them technology solutions to help them either grow more or preserve more or process more of what they're actually producing. And then their biggest challenge says is, well, we know all that. We're aggregated, we're a bigger market. We know we can link to buyers. We love this technology. We don't have any money, so we need financing. So we do provide some level of financing, but we also want to make them bankable. We want to sort of have them be able to access follow-on funding. So after our grant has gone away after 2 to 4 years, what's next for them? So we want to make sure those groups, those cooperatives and those producer groups, that they are linked to financial institutions who see them as viable business revenue generating units. So for success for us is now not only about our developmental impact, what we're doing with that actual group and how we're helping them produce more and sell more. Success for us now is what happens when we're gone and they are now part of the normal societal system. Do they still have a market that they're producing for? Do they still have buyers? Are they still able to access technology? Are they now able to go to a bank and get a loan or credit or an equity investment in their business? So for success for us is now beyond our own grant funding. It's what happens after. Did we really put these groups, as we say, on a pathway to prosperity, on a sustainable journey after us? Because we're in this as catalytic capital to jumpstart something. We want to help you develop. We want to help you expand. And then we want to link you so that you are sustainable after our funding is gone.
I want to come back to why do this? Why is the U.S. government interested in rural development in Africa?
So I think, I'm here in Ethiopia with something called the President's Advisory Council for Doing Business in Africa. And this was established under President Obama. And it's a very unique advisory council, if you will. An advisory council in the U.S. on doing business in Africa. Well, Africa is the youngest continent. It's going to be one of the largest markets on the planet. And American government institutions, American trade and investment agencies, and American businesses need to be doing more in Africa. And we see ourselves as the U.S. African Development Foundation as a way to champion and showcase African enterprises. To whom? To American companies, to other American agencies, to really sort of showcase the opportunity that is Africa. Not the problem to solve that is Africa, but the opportunity that Africa really presents. And so we see Africa as a place where we can turn the tide, where Africans produce what they don't consume and consume what they don't produce. We can turn the tide where Africa is a land where, yes, we can buy American goods, but we can also sell products to America. And so we want to use this rural development, this local economic development, as a vehicle to increase trade and investment so that here in Ethiopia, you can do more as you look at your economy and light manufacturing. And whether it's agricultural goods or whether it's leather goods, who do you want to sell to? Who do you want to buy from? And so we see this local economic development and development within African countries and stimulating economic development as a way to also stimulate trade and investment with the U.S. The U.S. needs good, stable, fantastic trading partners, and my position is that Africans are those loyal, sufficient, and really impactful trading partners, because we work at the grassroots. We work with these organizations. And so part of the President's Advisory Council for Doing Business in Africa, I've come along with more than 25 executive leaders of huge, big and small American business companies that are trying to understand, that are on a fact-finding mission, what's happening in Ethiopia. what's happening in Kenya, what's happening in Cote d'Ivoire, what's happening in Ghana. Are there deal making? Let me learn the facts. And are there fact making, deal making opportunities to link with micro, small, and medium sized Ethiopian businesses, Kenyan businesses, Ivorian businesses, Ghanaian businesses, but also are the governments really saying we're open for business with the U.S. And so, I think that the U.S. government is looking at a relationship with Africa that is critically important now, that's beyond foreign assistance, that's beyond aid, and it's really about investment, and it's about investing in Africans and their solutions and their opportunities, and then reaping the rewards as the U.S., as UCS, and we see you as more crucial partners, where it's not about a handout, it's about a helping hand. We're helping one another. We both are benefiting, and wherein that Africa then is truly a partner with the U.S. and these African communities that are in so need of some startup support. If we can help them sort of get started, they take off. You got it. They take off on their own, and hopefully, when you take off on your own, you will look back and say, there was an American development agency that I remember when our cooperative was small and we were exporting 1 container of coffee to the U.S. Now we're doing, one a day, and we do 365 a year. But that first, money to buy the drying station, the first funding to get the processing machine came from a U.S. government agency that really invested in us, invested in me. They didn't come and tell me what to do. They didn't come and make me apply all the rules and regulations that mattered to them. They met me where I was. They helped me advance. And now they saw me as an equal. They saw value in me. They gave me a start. And now, I'm self-reliant and I'm going along my way. And I'll look back and I'll partner with them because I think that they have quality and there's a real value in the relationship that's mutually beneficial.
Great. I want to ask you if you have a shining example from your grantees anywhere on the continent, and what that was, and what it became.
So we have as an agency that's been around for 30 plus years now, there are many different examples in different ways. And so let me just go through a couple of ones that stick out to me right now. In December, I went to Benin and I was meeting Shea Nut Cooperative, women who doing Shea, and to learn that this group that started with any number of...
For those of us who don't know, what is Shea?
So Shea, what is Shea? Shea is it's a nut that actually has butter, and so shea butter. If you think about
shea butter, okay.
Shea butter, okay. Yes, shea butter, but it's not a butter in the beginning.
It's a nut.
It's a nut that then you process and it becomes butter, if you will, like cocoa butter,
like peanut butter,
like peanut butter. Perfect example. Except for you don't eat it like peanut butter. No. You use it typically as cosmetic, exactly. Like a lotion or oil. Exactly. So we have, as quick examples, we have shea butter producers that are now selling into U.S. companies such as Whole Foods. I met companies, cashew nut producers that are now selling into big companies like Costco in the U.S. We have in East Africa, we have a coffee cooperative that started with one, and then it became 6 cooperatives that came together as a union. And now that coffee union is called Rashosco. They now have 40% market share of the entire Rwandan coffee market. 40% market share. And one thing that we're really proud of, and going back to sort of youth, is that in the U.S. and Texas, there's a festival that's a music festival and a technology festival and an innovation festival, and it's in Austin, Texas, and it's called South by Southwest. And this is where people come to dance and hear great music and think about technological solutions. And this year we said there's a lot of young people in Africa, young tech entrepreneurs, young social innovators that are doing things in Africa that Americans would never know about, but Americans also might want to invest in them. This venture capital space, this space where young people are looking for to be the next Mark Zuckerberg or the next Jeff Bezos of Amazon or the next Steve Jobs of Apple. Well, Africans are going to be those next, if you will. So we went, I took a young entrepreneur from Senegal, a young entrepreneur from Uganda, and a young entrepreneur from Kenya to Austin, Texas, and they showcased some of their innovations. So the young person in Senegal, if you know the online platform LinkedIn.
Yes.
So this is a young Senegalese guy, Kimo, who it has created sort of a Senegalese version of LinkedIn to connect young people to one another from a social networking platform, but also for job sourcing and job placement, and now has more than 50,000 and scaling to 100,000 subscribers on his platform. And so going to Texas in the U.S. and saying, I have this Senegalese guy who's creating LinkedIn, people were blown away. A young woman in Uganda who is creating low cost eyeglasses, but she's also in Uganda. The challenge of visual impairment is really rampant, especially in rural areas, because people there's not enough optometrists to get your eyes checked. She said something about the entire country is about 40 plus million people, but about 80 optometrists, and most of them are in Kampala, the capital city. So people in the rural areas don't even have the opportunity to do eye screening and eye testing. She created an app that could actually test your eyesight in rural places. Yes,
to your eye,
your phone to your eye, and is this a W or an E, or what letter do you see? And
That's quite impressive.
Oh, it's amazing. This woman's 25 at most. Created this great application, and then she didn't stop there. She then created a series of low-cost eyeglasses using recyclable plastic. So in Austin, Texas, a number of venture capitalist investors met her. Her name is Brenda. Met Brenda and couldn't believe she had the technological application for eye screening for visual impairment, but she also had some really funky, cool eyeglasses that were made from recyclable plastic in Uganda, and she got people, getting her business cards saying, I want to try to invest in you. And then a young guy, another guy in Kenya, who works with rural women, and instead of giving microcredit and microloans, he created a platform that gives them basically asset-backed financing. These women are in the tailoring industry, and so he ensures through financing and using M-Pesa, mobile money, but he ensures that they get access to sewing machines so that they can become independent tailors and seamstresses,
generate
their own income, earn enough on day one, because now they have the sewing machine, and now they're able to generate money and pay back, and the interest loans are very low because it's based upon a technology platform. So I could go on and on about, again, the companies that are exporting to U.S. markets, the companies even in Kenya, the energy entrepreneurs in that are doing solar-powered irrigation, that are doing solar-powered processing and cold storage, that are also linking to U.S. businesses and buying meters and batteries from U.S. businesses. So it really is Ethiopian businesses or Kenyan businesses or Nigerian businesses that are also linking with U.S. small and medium-sized businesses. So we feel like our success is really predicated upon the growing number of African micro, small, and medium-sized businesses, especially those that are operating in the places that are challenging, in these populations that are underserved. And that could be women and girls, it could be youth, it could be smallholder farmers, increasingly refugees. So ensuring that the skill development, the entrepreneurship development is reaching more and more people, and that we are generating local economic development, but ultimately that we really are putting people and communities, again, on this pathway to prosperity. We're giving you, helping you in the early stage, your start. And that is really important for us. Now, where you end up, it's going to be your own direction.
Exactly.
But we can say we can help you get started.
Yes.
So you told us that you were in a fact-finding mission in Africa. So how do the facts look like? I mean, for example, the Ethiopian government have recently decided to privatize some huge companies. Do you see big American companies partner with this, like Ethiopian Airlines, Ethio Telecom in the near future?
So I can tell you, this is our first stop. on a 2.5-week journey, Ethiopia, Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, and Ghana. And I can say, if the rest of the trip is anywhere near as dynamic as it's been in Ethiopia, the American companies who aren't here are going to be so jealous that they aren't a part of this fact-finding trip, a part of the President's Advisory Council for Doing Business in Africa, PAC-DBIA, because the energy, the opportunity, and the willingness of the government and the business community here in Ethiopia has been phenomenal. That's the only word I can use, phenomenal. There's not a company that's here that whatever they thought about Ethiopia 2 days ago before we arrived, their mind has been changed, and I'll be frank, their mind has been blown away by the opportunities that the Ethiopian government under the new prime minister and the reforms that we see, but also the openness and the willingness to collaborate, to partner, to do more together. It's really been a great start to what we feel is going to be a great trip. And I do see more and more big American companies that are here that are doing more, whether it's Boeing or whether it's GE, doing even more. But I also see new, small, medium-sized businesses that can provide technological solutions in your industrial parks. That small and medium-sized businesses that can help with agro-processing, where we're talking about value addition. So I see opportunities for American businesses at every stage of business growth. There are companies that are going to want to work with telecom, right? Large companies. There are going to be large companies that are going to want to work with Ethiopian Airlines, but there are also going to be small and medium-sized American companies that are going to want to work with the majority of Ethiopia's population. I mean, just to say a country of 100 million people, and then the population under 30 being 70 million, that alone tells you the amount of energy and opportunity that is coming. And so American businesses are looking for opportunity. And I can tell you, this country right now, we're lucky. The U.S. government and U.S. business community is lucky to be here right now as you are on your way of increasing your growth. You already are, even in challenging times, we're a leader in GDP growth and economic development. But now in times of where things are flourishing, the American companies that are here, this is our opportunity and this is our chance, and we're really excited about the partnership and the relationship that the Ethiopian government at all levels and the Ethiopian business community at all levels, the way that the door is open for U.S. companies, U.S. organizations, U.S. agencies, U.S. business to come in. We're really excited.
Thank you. To clarify for our audience, Mr. Glin is with the delegation that has accompanied the Undersecretary of Commerce to Ethiopia and various other African countries. Can you tell us a little bit more about the companies that are part of your delegation and what they do, just so people would understand the kind of delegation that is here?
So this is, again, the President's Advisory Council for Doing Business in Africa, started under President Obama, continuing under President Trump, and it is a number of executive level leaders of American large, small, and medium-sized companies that have come together to sort of really do more and to do business in Africa. And so these are companies like UPS. These are companies like GE, General Electric. These are companies such as Dow Chemical. There are companies, small companies like Amethyst Technologies that does healthcare. So a range of Computer Frontiers, a range of companies that are brand names, big brand name companies, Citi, in terms of Citibank, financial solutions. But there are also Bechtel, which does large scale infrastructure. They create roads, they create pipelines, they create any number of things. So big American brands, but also companies from the Midwest of the U.S. So small or medium-sized companies, but they have really great agricultural solutions. So there's a company called Instapro that is from Des Moines, Iowa. And they have processing equipment that basically can take maize and soy and create a maize soy mill that can be used for food, that can be used in any number of food ingredients, but also their equipment processes soy so that it can be used for animal feed. So in Ethiopia, a large population, obviously, of livestock. Those livestock need to be fed. And so there are small scale American companies that want to do business in Africa and large scale companies that want to do business in Africa. And this delegation, again, of 20 plus business executives, also with 11 U.S. government agencies. So the delegation, let's say if it's 30 plus people, 20 plus are American businesses, another 10 which are U.S. government agencies that want to link. We want to say we're bringing the government agencies and we're bringing the business community and we're bringing all that to Ethiopia. And we're saying the U.S. is here and we want to partner with you. So we're excited. The leader of the entire delegation is the Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. He's not on this leg of the trip, but he'll join on other legs of the trip. And the Undersecretary of Commerce, Gil Kaplan, is leading the delegation here in Ethiopia. But it's really an important signal of the U.S. private sector and an important signal about our interest in Africa on trade and investment, and that while other countries can come potentially with, let's say, cheap goods, that cheap becomes expensive because you got to buy it more often. It breaks down really fast. But
it's expensive to be poor.
It's expensive, exactly. It's expensive to be poor, and it's expensive to buy cheap things.
Yeah.
So we're saying that American companies and American organizations and entities bring value, long-term relationship, and bring quality. So that's the message that we're trying to send, and we're hoping that Ethiopian and African businesses see that more and more. That while we may have been slow of looking at Africa and business opportunities, we're here now, and we want to do more.
We look forward to a lot more U.S. private engagement. I'm sure our listeners would be very much on the lookout for future U.S. partnership.
It's great. That's great.
Anything you want to add? Anything that we did not ask that you want to say?
I would just reiterate the role of the U.S. African Development Foundation as an agency that is Africa-focused, that really focuses on African-led development, that really looks at bottom-up driven development, in that where we look at our investment of seed capital, grant financing linked with local technical assistance to really put communities, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises on this pathway to prosperity, that we see ourselves as a great partner. We see ourselves as a great partner with the communities. We see ourselves as a great partner with countries and partners with corporations. So
on this show, we usually ask the guest what is his or her most favorite aspect of the United States. What do you like most about the USA? What's your favorite thing?
Wow, that's a great question. What do I like most about the USA? I think, my answer, it's shaped with my experience right now in Africa, and it's where, on some level, everyone has the opportunity for opportunity. So literally, I think that what the U.S. in its formation, if you will, and in its construct can provide is an opportunity for anyone to succeed. Obviously, as an African American, there are challenges that abound in that framing, but I do think in its fundamental makeup that the focus on providing an opportunity and the quality of opportunity is what I value about the U.S., and it's what I really value about what's happening in Africa. As economies are growing, that we are creating the opportunity for more Africans, wherever they may be, wherever they may live in the continent, whichever geography they may live in a certain country, where there's an opportunity for them to advance. I see my role and my agency's role, my organization's role, to help advancing those opportunities. And I see that the U.S., I can say that I've been blessed to have had the opportunities I have, being in the U.S. and being able to sort of express my desires in different ways and being able to succeed, because that the society and the fabric provides that opportunity, and I see more and more of that happening in Africa, where Africans are getting more and more, and I see it in Ethiopia in the past 2 days. Opportunities seem to be opening up, and I think that's what I value most, and that's what I want most for Africa.
Thank you very much, sir. We're honored that you've been on Real Talk USA.
Thank you very much.
It's my honor. Real talk.
Real Talk, yes.
Real Talk USA.
It's my house, come on, turn it up.
The hour where the U.S. mission to the African Union comes to you through Afro FM 105.3 to highlight the United States partnership in Africa. Current issues will be discussed. Guests will engage on a variety of topics ranging from politics to jazz. Co-hosted by AUL Solomon of Afro FM and Chris Mead of USAU. The show will air every Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. Feel free to participate by sending messages to the USAU social media sites www.usau.usmission.gov or www.facebook.com/USAU and follow USAU on twitter.com/USAU.
Just relax. Welcome to my house.
Real Talk USA.
Welcome to my house. It's my house.